Well, I'm just going to review in this video how to set up SpringDataJPA for your projects. Alright, so starting from the CamperMVC project in the CIS 2232 2017-2018 Part 2 repository, this one here. Alright, so this project is right here. So if I hit the this folder, Topic 3 MVC Part 2, it's a CamperMVC project. That's the starting point for this activity. Alright, you can see if I hover over the name here, you can see that's the one I'm in. And it's directly out of Bitbucket. So if you follow along, this should be exactly the same as what you see in Bitbucket. Okay, so you can see in here, I've got a SpringDataJPA package. And it's got some of the repository set up for the standard tables, the user repository, code value repository, and code type repository. Alright, so that's one piece that we're going to be getting into. Another package that's applicable is the info HCCIS camper model JPA. So in here are going to be some entity classes. And these are classes which are built from the database. So if I look at the camper, you can see there's a lot of annotations associated with this class, but ultimately it's just a Java class with some attributes, getters, setters, constructors, toString, equal method, and equals method. So just some a standard Java class with a bunch of extra stuff, which provides information for SpringDataJPA to use while interfacing with the database. Alright, so if you want to look at it in particular, I can see that the ID field associated with this class. Alright, so it's the table is the camper table, and this is the primary key for that table, the ID. Notice that it's an integer with a capital I, so it's a class type, not just an int, primitive data type. Alright, so I'll just go over quickly how that was generated. If I delete it, I can easily recreate it since it's built directly from the database. So what I want to do is right-click on the package name where I want to put it. So I want to put any of my entity classes which are built from the database inside this model JPA package. So I want to create an entity class from the database. Alright, so I need to have a connection to my database. So the applicable database here is Canes. So here's one of Canes connecting as CIS 2232 admin and the test 1234 database. So I can use that one. If not, you would have to come down and say new database connection. If you were going to do that, you would pick MySQL. Your database name would have to be the applicable database and a username and password that has the rights to connect to that database. I could use root and no password because I don't have security set up on my local host here. Or I could use CIS 2232 admin _admin and test 1234, the capital T, if I wanted to, as long as I can connect to that database. All right, I just continue on, and I would give it a name here. Something appropriate that indicates whenever I see it in the list what it actually is, like Canes, CIS 2232 admin. Alright, so come back here again, and this time I'll pick it, the one that was already there. So Canes, CIS 2232 admin, this should be the one I want. And you see now it connected to the database and gave me a list of the tables which don't already have entity classes created. Well, these ones do, I guess. Code type, code value, and user. But if I was going to pick them, I would be updating those classes, not generating new ones. Right? So I'm going to pick the camper table. And let's see what it gives me a quick overview of what it's going to create. Ultimately, it's going to create a camper class. Right? I don't want to select any of these options. And I can use this. This will tells it how to generate collections if you have a one-to-many relationship inside your class, inside your table to other tables. All right, in this case, for this course, we're keeping our database tables relatively simple. We're not implementing the foreign keys necessarily, unless you really want to get into that, but it adds a little complexity to things. So if I did have those, I'm going to pick a list. All right, now I'll finish, and off it goes, reading the database and building me my camper class. You'll see the red should go away after I have my camper class back. All right, and it generates that the same as it did before because it was generated directly from the database. And I'm hoping that red goes away soon. It should. There it goes. Okay, so that's the one thing you have to do is build your class from the database. So, because to use SpringDataJPA, you have to have that extra information that is built into this class for it to work. All right, the second step is to build your repository. So we're going to build a repository. So basically we create a camper repository similarly to how the user repository was created. So I'm just going to copy it and paste it. Call it. All right, so I'm going to call it camper repository. And you'll see what this class is. It's just an interface which extends the CRUD repository. This CRUD repository is, let's see up above here, comes from the Spring Framework Data Repository package. And this is what has all the boilerplate database functionality built into it. So whenever I have this, I'm going to call it, see it's called camper repository. I have to set it up to work with the camper class and also provide the type of the primary key. In this case, it's an integer. Right, I'm going to hit Control-Shift-I to organize my imports. And there we go. My camper repository is created. Yeah, I should note that this year your project should have been up and running before you started making these changes. You want to make sure that your project ran successfully. All right, so now I've got my step 2. So first step was to create my camper class from the database. Second step is to create my repository. And finally, the third step is to inject that camper repository into my controller where I want to use it. All right, so my camper controller class is this. If I want to use that camper repository in this class, what I'll do is inject it using constructor injection. All right, so I'm going to create a private final camper repository. And I need an auto-wired to tell it that this is a candidate for injection. You see the little warning here. It says CR is not initialized in the default constructor, and that's what we're going to do here in the default constructor. So I'm going to create a default constructor, public. And into that as a parameter, I'm going to pass the camper repository. And Spring will take care of injecting it into this constructor for me. So pass it in, Spring takes care of that, it injects, in this context it will inject a camper repository into my camper controller class. And I have to assign the variable, the attribute from the input variable. There, that's it, that's the third step. I'm fully set up to use the repository inside this controller. All right, so if I want to use it for an example, say I come down to the delete method. I just have to analyze what's going on here. Here we are. I've got a DAO method trying to delete a particular ID. All right, so I'm going to replace that with the JPA, the SpringDataJPA functionality. CR dot, see all the methods that are available to me. So deletes, find alls, save, those are the big ones. Find one by the primary key. All right, but I'm going to delete based on an integer. I'll use this string to get my integer value. All right, so I have to cast that to an int. And so since I'm using the SpringDataJPA to delete it, I no longer have to use the DAO. All right, I'll finish off with this one as well. All right, if I want to get the list of campers, I'm going to replace that with the SpringDataJPA functionality, which is camper repository cr.findAll. This is going to give me back, if I look at the return type, it's going to give me back an iterable object, and it says it cannot be converted to an array list, but it can be cast to an array list. All right, so I'm getting back my iterable. Array list is an iterable, so it can be cast to this array list. There we go. I'm going to put that array list into the model and head back to the view to show it. All right, so I'll test this. So pause the video for a sec. It might take a couple minutes for this to launch. Okay, you can see by the clock down here, 2 minutes have passed. My application has launched successfully. And test that delete functionality. Right, we're set up that we have to put in a username in order to log in. All right, I'll try to delete Patrick here. There we go. So that invoked the SpringDataJPA functionality instead. I would have to go through the rest of my project. You know what I mean? There's lots of other database work going on in here. Select, I would use a find one. Add. Or here, my update from my camper DAO, I would use the save method. To do that, all I have to do is pass the camper object to the save method, and it will take care of everything for me. All right, some more list, get the find all again, same as before. All right, so that's about it for setting up your project to use SpringDataJPA.